This might not be the kind of piercing you were thinking of, but let's give it a shot. So I have another video where I talk about punched spinnings using a hole punch to put perforations into the metal and then spin it, which is a slightly more advanced spinning technique. What I thought I'd cover in this video is other ways of piercing or perforating the metal that will result in different kind of openings in your spinning that can be used for either functional or decorative aspects of the piece. So I have 3 different samples here. And first I want to talk about layout. You certainly don't have to be as regular in the layout as I like to be. You could be more intuitive and organic with the overall design of the piece. I tend to be more radial or symmetric with the pieces, just as a matter of personal preference. If you do like to lay out your pieces in a regular fashion, I'd highly recommend learning some practical or applied geometry. So there's great books like this one by John Allen, Drawing Geometry, where you learn different techniques for laying out both simple and complex geometries, or finding the center of a disc or circle without a center finder and just a compass, things like that. So highly recommend that. I also use just a basic circle template a lot, either for eyeballing pieces or for lining up perpendicular diameters of the discs or something like that. So that's another great tool in the studio. So these 3 different discs, these are all 2-inch 22 gauge aluminum that have been annealed before spinning. And I have the kind of before and after results, and then I'll spin these 3 samples too to show you how that goes. This disc was first drilled and then slight sort of pierced lines following that interior diameter, and that's covered in the sawing video and piercing. This second one was used doing the hole punch that I have from the other punch spinnings video, alternating 2 different sizes there. And then this one was actually cut with a metal chisel and just a scrap steel block, putting the aluminum disc against that, hammering, and then punching nearly through the metal blank. So those will all, as you can see from the finished spinnings, yield different results. What I find is with a circular or hole punched, it tends not to tear in the blank as much, so it just tends to distort through the spinning process. And you can see those punch discs becoming sort of distorted as the blank is spun into a different form. With the sawn and pierced, you can see that there's a certain amount of tearing, but it is an interesting way of getting kind of a more square blank, but it's more difficult to control the openings because one end of the pierced line is drilled and the other is just sawn, but there will be a fair amount of tearing that'll happen there. And then with the punched blank, you can see again, since the metal has a rougher cut to it, that it's also going to continue to tear as it is spun and formed. Another thing I should point out in the layout of where I put openings into the piece, I know the size of the chuck that I'll be spinning against, and so I've outlined that interior circle is the diameter of the spinning chuck that I'm spinning against, and then I don't tend to put any sort of openings or piercings too close to the lip, since that's required for a lot of stability for the spinning, so I'll keep them kind of in that middle zone. So that's the 2 main circles that I've laid out there, and then I've decided to put those openings or piercings on the midpoint between those 2 circles. All right, so I've set the first blank up in the lathe. It's centered and lubricated with wax, and this blank is the one that was drilled and then sawn with slight little piercings through it. I've made a smaller follower block that'll let me get the tool in there to seat this smaller spinning. And here we go. So first, as always, I'll seat that blank to keep it from shifting. And you can hear even from the beginning the tool going over those piercings. And it's important to have, once you have that seated, you do want to change the follower block because a smaller follower block isn't going to support the piece very well, and it could shift back and forth on you. So just change that out. And this is slightly larger than the diameter of the spinning chuck, just to keep the blank secured in place. But I've got it seated enough and centered. Locking everything back down in place. Give it a go by hand, make sure we're all set. And off for the rest of the spinning. So with small scale spinnings like this, you need to be, particularly ones that are pierced, you want to be very careful of how much pressure you're using, and you want to stop and check the spinning frequently to see how those openings or distortions are happening and how much tearing you might want to get or not be getting with the piece. And I'm probably applying equal amounts of pressure both in the forward spinning action out to the lip and then back spinning it back down. Try and keep wall thickness uniform and not put too much pressure on the area that's pierced. And you can see the different lengths of the saw cuts are opening up to different degrees. I'm going to keep pushing this one to see if we can spin it nearly all the way down or how far we'll get before we get significant tearing. Sometimes you'll get some creaking like that from different chucks or follower blocks. You can see they'll continue to open up. What I want to watch is to make sure that there's not any tears reaching all the way out to the lip or to the other openings that are going to cause it to completely fail. You might want some nice openings in it for a decorative reason or for a candle cup holder or something like that. We'll give it one more go. And that's probably, you can see it really starting to tear out there on that largest saw cut. And probably going any further is going to cause it to completely tear and fail then. So that's as far as I want to go on this spinning. Okay, now we've got the blank that was punched with the steel chisel. And we'll see how those tear and open up. And I've set up the smaller follower block so I can get the spinning seated. Again, it's been centered and lubricated to start with. Just want to make sure that it'll find its place back to center when I change the follower block. All right. I'll have another video where I talk about how I set up these different follower blocks to be interchangeable between different threaded tools for the lathe. Had that idea while I was working on this one. Tighten everything back down. And we're ready to go again. So again, I'm watching and checking frequently those openings. And just like with the punch spinnings, as these negative spaces open up, you can see there's a lot more tool vibration. And then these punched openings, you see they start tearing open wider and wider. And the amount of opening will be greater if that punch line is perpendicular to a radius or diameter of the piece, but if it's in line with it, it won't really open up as much. It'll just kind of elongate. So this is a lot more visually apparent, cutting the openings along this orientation. So it's getting a bit distressed, but not quite failing yet. We're going to keep going. And again, I'm particularly with pierced or punched spinnings with openings, really using a fair amount of force on the back spinning as well to make sure I don't tear it. Probably just one more quick go before these. No, they're close enough. I'm not going to risk it any further. So that's probably as much as I can open up those punched segments of the spinning before, if I tried to spin it again, it'd probably just tear that lip right off there. So that's as far as I'm going to go with that one. All right, now I've set up with the third blank, the one that's punched with different size holes. Again, it's been centered and lubricated before we started spinning. Just going to get it seated to start with against the undersized follower block. Again, I'm not going all the way out yet because I don't want to cause too much force on the spinning and have it tilt before I have it seated nice and snugly on there. So that's all I need to do there. Change out the follower block again. All right, reset the spinning. And we're ready to go again. And again, with this much material removed, I'm really not using a lot of force, just being very delicate and kind of even amounts of force from spinning forward to the back spinning. You can see how the holes start to distort and stretch along those radial lines. Keep going. Not using too much force against that lip that would tear through the small amount of metal between the punched areas. But just kind of slowly laying it down against the chuck as far as I can. I'm looking for small little tears. Check that. And we can see we have one here between the two holes. So depending on your designs and what you want to be working on, that might be considered a failure, or might want to stop there. But I think if we go any further, we're going to get worse tears and the piece will just completely come apart. So that's as far as I'm going to spin this piece. But hopefully these three give you an idea of different ways that you could pierce or perforate your spinnings and how that might distort in the spinning process. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to hit that subscribe button so that you can hear from me when I post future videos. Thanks for stopping by.